when you apply that to imperialism and colonialism, you can achieve harmony at the end of a sword in a very different way. Harmony is when everybody does what they're supposed to do. That's a very different relationship with harmony than our Western perception of this idealized Eastern philosophical harmony. When we use the word harmony in English, it means like, peace and tranquility. It doesn't involve a hammer, right? There's not a lot of versions of our spiritual idealism that involve a hammer and a nail and like pounding everything flat so that we achieve harmony.
And thank you for saying that last sentence. I think connecting it back to the earlier point of something that you had said at the beginning of this conversation is you said you're not seeking out spiritual experiences when you go to train Aikido. And you had said that it was the physicality as a teacher and as a practitioner that has been important to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we connected that with this age-old adage of form is emptiness and emptiness is form. But coming back to something I've noticed is that in this receiving of your partner's essence, so to speak, whatever the distraction could be that, or love or joy, playfulness, there is a very fast learning of copying that at a subconscious level, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I had to learn that in a different way, I don't know, go to improv theater so I feel like that has been a gift as well to, often one has to be open to a certain kind of thing. But for me, one thing that has touched me is taking care of another. When I have been taken care of in a technique and it's become very obvious that there is that martial aspect and seriousness, and this person has the capacity as an advanced practitioner to destroy,
mm-hmm.
and they have taught me something while keeping me protected. That's a very touching experience that I repeatedly find in Aikido. And when I've in Aikido in particular, when I do not experience that, which has only happened very few times, the thing that has come in me is caution, and that I should not train with this person. Particularly, this happened when I don't know in a workshop environment. Has rarely happened. Was like train with someone else. Because they know a lot more, but I felt that security was not there. I was like, I will get hurt here.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. I've definitely trained with people like that, and it can be its own teaching tool, that moment of discomfort. And I've definitely trained with people that ride that edge of safety. And there have been times where I thought, oh, the only reason I'm okay is because of my ukemi. The way I received the technique kept me safe. And the hope is that person that you're training with was attentive enough to my ability to receive the technique that they could put in all of that power and strength. And I don't want to say disregard for my safety, but if a training partner has complete disregard for my safety and complete lack of awareness of whether I can keep myself safe or not, it's not a good, it's a recipe for disaster, really.
Right.
Someone's going to end up hurt.
Yeah.
And I don't want to constantly have to be scrambling around trying desperately to keep myself safe from that other person. It's not necessarily what the emphasis in my Aikido practice should be.
To remain safe, or
to be scared about my own safety.
Right.
It's a difficult place to learn from, to be always on edge about how hurt I'm about to become. It can be a really good teaching tool if you survive that experience. You might walk away from it going, oh, okay, I made it out alive only because of these skills that I had or quickly picked up. But it's not a good way to train for me.
I noticed in one of the teachers, Pete Sensei, you mentioned some teachers have a different emphasis. I feel like what's unique, or one of the emphasis that I've seen in him that I get corrected a lot on, is this knee that you just left out there. These things can actually happen. And I'm very grateful for that. I was like, whoa.
The potential for injury.
The potential for injury is like broken knee.
Yeah.
dislocated joint. So,
Right.
but that brings that alertness and awareness that
Right.
I feel in absence of it, I don't know how you would even adjust. And often we do very powerful techniques, and they become more clear when you know why it's being done that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
So, what is for you, what is the essence you feel like you have cultivated or are continuing to cultivate, or perhaps has changed over time? Any way you want to take this?
The essence of my Aikido practice. I'm not sure. I mean, I think that just coming back to this idea of inhabiting my physical body and the lessons that the physicality of my Aikido practice have to teach me, um, it keeps me plugged in to the training, to the teaching. My students have become my teachers without me going to a dojo and training with a sensei that is my teacher. My students have very much become my teachers, and now my experience of my physical body and my physical interaction in class, in teaching and showing, and then in watching the mirror that you all hold up to me, is really profoundly instructive for my practice as well. I get to see through the embodiment of my teaching and my students what I need to work on too. Right? So it's that physical impact, not the physical, but it's the impact of the physical on my emotional and mental, spiritual well-being that it keeps me going.
Well, also, thank you for creating this environment. As a student, I can say that it's benefited my life in more ways that I can imagine. I've come here on many days, and always, as you were saying, I think every time I've left the dojo feeling great.
Yeah.
And I always use that as a reminder on days where I feel like, oh, I just don't have it in me to show up today. It's like, oh, remember each time I always feel rejuvenated and renewed after training. So thank you for that. And I feel like you embody so many of the principles that O Sensei states, which should be the culmination of this practice, and that gives confidence in Aikido. That it's as an example of any art is its practitioners, and I'm deeply touched with any senior practitioners that I go to. It's like, yeah, this is where I should be.
Yeah, I feel the same.
Yeah. Thank you. What do you think is the future of Aikido? You might be one of the people who are actively engaged in creating it because you have this dojo. I know that O Sensei had a certain kind of vision, which I don't know too much about, but I know that he had a vision when he brought this to the world, or it came through him.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see that?
I think with time and distance from O Sensei's original teachings and even Saito Sensei's teachings too, it's Aikido is sort of balanced on this cusp of, as with any martial tradition, spiritual tradition, religious tradition, the fracturing that happens, which is always ironic when the core teaching is one of unification and coming together in agreement and understanding and harmony, that an art centered around that core concept is also becoming fractured and disparate and disconnected. There's some teachers that are trying to draw those connections together again. And it's, I don't know, it encourages me every time I see a teacher trying to make efforts to embody their understanding of Aikido, share it with the world, and draw connections, not necessarily parallels, but connections to other practitioners, either in the martial arts world broadly, or Aikido specifically, or Iwama Aikido in particular, just to find some way to connect it back together. I don't like the idea that things would become fractured and these little balkanization of Aikido practice where our dojo is its own separate thing, disconnected from all other Aikido schools. And every school operates in that sort of cult of personality where the sensei is teaching something that's completely different. But the flip side of that is I just read an article recently about you can preserve something to death, that the idea that we should only ever do the thing the way it was done, teach the way it was taught, share the way it was shared, so that we can honor Saito Sensei, who was honoring O Sensei, and only ever do it this one way. That to me denies the individual experience, denies the self, the body that has to hold the understanding of Aikido. So I don't pretend to teach O Sensei's Aikido. I don't pretend to teach Saito Sensei's Aikido, because I am not Saito Sensei and I'm not O Sensei. I am teaching my understanding of Aikido that I hold in my body, that I continue to evolve as I understand myself and through the process of teaching. And that's the closest thing, that coming back to this concept of expertise versus experience. That's all I have to share is my experience. I don't have expertise to share. And I want Aikido teachers that recognize that what they're sharing is their own understanding in their own bodies. Those to me are some of the best teachers, really.
I like how you made this distinction between experience versus expertise. Would you briefly want to say a little bit more as to what you see that as difference?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I can. I don't know. A lot of times but I have seen myself have this tendency too, where there's this mistaken belief that simply by having done a thing makes you an expert in it. We have this idea that we can get a degree in a thing and then we're an expert in it, or we have a master's or a PhD in a thing and we're an expert in it, or we've done it for 10,000 hours and then we're an expert in it. And our experience is such a continuum. Expertise makes me think that it's an end point, and experience is eternal. We keep learning, we keep experiencing, and that's what I have to share. Is that continually ever-changing experience of myself and my body and my practice and my Aikido.
Yeah, that's very powerful. I feel like there's something very deep in there, perhaps just as earlier you were drawing a distinction between Jitsu and Do. Do and Jitsu, the path and the technique. I think there is some connection there. Briefly on the same subject, O Sensei, talking a little bit about O Sensei, I know very little of the history, but I find it very touching as I've been exposed to a few spiritual traditions, and I have sort of this archetype where I have not stuck to one path, and I have a little bit of a scholarly approach to exploring things, while valuing that you have to go deeper into a practice to really learn anything for that matter. So when it seems like that he was very intense, which is a quality I am always touched by when I see in someone. And that he was in a very violent culture, and he also, as a martial art practitioner, he seeked other teachers and fights, and at some point, and was also a spiritual practitioner at the same time, exposed to the Japanese culture, or time point when there was wars going around and a lot of human suffering. And all of these different paths culminated in him having this realization and bringing in Aikido as you mentioned earlier, an art of peace, that the practice itself is transformatory in establishing peace, initially perhaps in Japan, and then in his vision in the world as well. So without actually going to war, having the transformation to see the non-necessity while simultaneously becoming cultivating whatever your essence of the warrior is.
Yeah, it's hard for me to really hypothesize as to his personal transformation. I think there's a lot written about it, and there's a lot of study to be done on that for sure. But I think you're right. I think that experience of the war, several wars, right? The Sino-Japanese War as well, and Japanese imperialism. There's a phrase in Japanese, I don't know it in Japanese, but the translation is the nail that sticks up gets hammered down, which is the Japanese version of harmony. So when the Japanese speak of harmony, it's like, I have a hammer. I'm going to go find any nails that are sticking up and pound them all flat. And when you apply that to imperialism and colonialism, you can achieve harmony at the end of a sword in a very different way. Harmony is when everybody does what they're supposed to do. That's a very different relationship with harmony than our Western perception of this idealized Eastern philosophical harmony. When we use the word harmony in English, it means like, peace and tranquility. It doesn't involve a hammer, right? There's not a lot of versions of our spiritual idealism that involve a hammer and a nail and like pounding everything flat so that we achieve harmony. So I think part of that realization maybe, and again, this is just hypothesizing, but part of that realization may have come with the results of wars and suffering, having a spiritual idealism of unity, and then realizing that unity brought through war and violence and conquest maybe isn't the unity that benefits all of humanity.
The nail and hammer example reminds me of communism in some ways,
if everybody agrees and plays along, it is very harmonious. And when people feel disadvantaged or taken advantage of or controlled, our human impulse is to fight against that. So it's a difficult balance to strike, I'm sure. I mean, this veers further into politics than spirituality.